I can't wait, because mine and Carmen Carrion's new book, Freaky Folklore, Terrifying Tales of the World's Most Elusive Monsters and Enigmatic Cryptids, is coming July 16th, featuring the history and lore of terrifying folklore creatures from across the globe, alongside some cool and creepy illustrations. Pre-order today on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or your favorite bookstore, or go to eeriecast.com/freak. The next 1,000 verified pre-orders will get a Freaky Folklore decal and a 3-month subscription code to EerieCast Plus, and all entrants will get a free PDF sneak peek of the Freaky Folklore book. To verify and for more info, go to eeriecast.com/freak. Send your scariest workplace stories to us at eeriecast.com/submit, and rate and review Tales from the Break Room on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks.
Hi, welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you?
Today's stories really show you that you can never truly tell what someone is thinking. Even when those folks come in, insisting that I should know by now after all these years what their usual is. But I can never bring myself to tell them I couldn't give 2 decafs about remembering their faces or their orders. Well, lucky you, I've got a set of true scary work stories today about monstrous men, haunted roads, and voices from beyond. Enjoy. These are Tales from the Break Room. Mehling Hall Haunting, from Ash O. It's May 29th, 2001 at the University of Portland in North Portland, Oregon. Catherine Johnson's friend is headed towards her dorm at Mehling Hall to check on Catherine. She didn't show up to lunch at the Commons. None of Catherine's friends have heard from her in several days. They had just celebrated her 21st a week earlier at the local bar. Catherine, Kate for short, which her family and friends called her, didn't drink though, even on her 21st. She was a true child of God and lived her life based on those principles, devoutly and joyfully. Her friend arrives at Mehling Hall, but Kate's door is locked. She asks one of the few remaining staff on campus to open the door. When the door is finally opened, they discover Kate's lifeless, nude body on the floor. Her friend tells the 911 dispatcher through panic that her friend is purple and cold. Catherine's brutal murder shocks the small Catholic university and especially her loving family and friends. Time passes painstakingly. It's now August 2002, about 14 months since Kate's senseless murder. No suspects are in custody. I arrive at University of Portland. I had just given birth to my daughter and had just placed her up in adoption only days prior. The university assigns me to live at Mehling Hall. Mehling Hall is a ginormous brick building. It has 195 rooms. Out of all the rooms in this building I could have been put in, I was placed in the room right next to Catherine's. I wasn't informed of any of this before I came. I knew nothing of the murder. It was a long time ago, and news didn't spread the way it does now. I also had signed to the university very late in the summer, which is probably why I was assigned to that room. I'm sure these surrounding rooms were filled last or difficult to fill. So there I was, a little ball of trauma trying to start over. I found out quickly about Kate's murder and the fact that the killer was still not caught. Girls would speak in the hall and look at her door with empathy, disbelief, and some with fear. I would hear others whisper of break-ins and burglaries in the dorm as well. I was terrified at all this, but I didn't say anything. I expressed so little at the time. I was really just trying to take it all in stride. My roommate was a sweet, quiet girl herself that snored like a grown man at night. It would wake me up, but I usually was up and down all night anyways. I was still doing postpartum care on my body. I know, I was at college, so it was a little bit embarrassing. So I was constantly in the communal bathroom. When no one was in the hallway, I would touch Kate's door and give her a nice thought as I passed to the bathroom. One night, my roommate was snoring loudly. I went to the bathroom. In the scary, dimly lit restroom, I heard a loud, angry moan. It sounded so inhuman, it made me jump, and my body was covered in shivers. I shook so badly, I was barely able to walk out of the bathroom. When I brought myself to get to the hallway opening, I looked towards the direction of the haunting sound. Unfortunately, it was by my room. It did not sound normal. You know how certain sounds can give you a feeling? The way this one made me feel, it still haunts me to this day. I listened carefully in that hallway, staring towards Kate's door, trying to identify the sound before finally daring to scurry back to my room. As I did, I heard the moan again. The crazy, scary sound, like some sort of foreign, inhumanly pitched screech coming from Kate's room. I trembled and held back a scream. I was frozen there. To get back to my room, I would have to pass her room. I then ran as fast as I could on tiptoes, past Kate's room and into mine. I slunk into my bed, as small and quiet as I could. I felt like something was watching me, like I had somehow caught something's attention. And I felt that way from that night on, and always especially after dark. I'm not going to insult Kate by insinuating that she was a ghost or haunting spirit at Mehling Hall. Kate was with God. They say, though, the psychic pain that attaches itself to buildings when horrific things occur is very real. That's why there are so many reports and sightings of paranormal activity in places like prisons, psych wards, and hospitals. Anywhere there is tremendous suffering. I was already about as raw as a person could be at the time, so I believe that the veil could have been a little thinner for me. I would lie in bed at night and wait to hear that noise. Most nights I wouldn't, but some I would. Every time I heard it and felt that strange moan, I would see this eerie shadow flash by my exterior window. I was rightfully terrified. I would shut my eyes really tight and think about my family. I didn't mention it to anyone. I felt as if people would think I was crazy or seeking attention. I stayed in that room next to Kate's for a few weeks. Later, I was moved further down the same hallway to a different room with my teammate Whitney. I still had to pass by Kate's room to get to the elevators and exit. I would always touch her door, still giving her good thoughts whenever I was alone in the hallway passing by. It's like though I was afraid of that room and that noise, I felt a small and strange connection. There was another bathroom further down the hall, closer to my new room, and this one had a bathtub. Yuck, right? A communal bathtub. During fall break, when I was only one of several students staying at Mehling Hall, because I was pretty poor and not from around there, I stayed in the building. I was taking a shower in that gross communal bathtub. I had injured my leg greatly and had to reserve myself to using the spacious, easy-to-use bathtub. I made a habit to always avoid using the bathroom by Kate's room. I was scared in the bathrooms there, but being alone on my floor made me even more scared. I was washing my hair, and in between blinks of water waving down my face, trying to keep my eyes dry, I made out something outside the curtain. I squinted, barely opening my eyes, and I saw a tall, shadowy figure standing there in the bathroom, through the cream-colored shower curtain. I screamed loud, and I threw the curtain open, but when I did, there was no one there. But I was so terrified. I got out of the bath and went quickly back to my room. The figure had been there, I'd seen it, and it wasn't just my eyes playing tricks. Later on, during the same fall break, on another occasion, I heard another noise towards the end of the hall when I was in my room alone one night. I poked my head down the hall slightly towards the sound and direction of Kate's room. I saw one of the basketball players, a guy, I think his name was Mike, going room to room, softly trying to open every door handle. When you see a person in predatory mode, and they don't know they're being watched, it's one of the most alarming things ever, very creepy. I quietly closed my door and prayed he did not come all the way down to my room. He didn't, by the way. I didn't know what he was doing, but it looked and felt awful. I was still a brainwashed coward and didn't understand anything about other people. Heck, Kate's killer still hadn't been caught. This literally could be him returning. Although he wasn't the killer, he still could have been at that time. I didn't see people for what they were. I should have reported him, but I didn't. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I always thought the athletes were good folks back then. Folks who didn't do terrible things. What an idiot kid I was. We're all idiot kids at one point or another. During that year at Mehling Hall, the killer was never caught. There was another brutal assault I heard of. An ex-boyfriend snuck into Mehling through the basement when someone propped it open. The university kept everything very hush-hush about the details of her death and of any suspects. Admittedly, the security there was a joke. I learned more about Kate from my coach. His and her families were very close, so it was a personal loss to him. I had heard rumors that there had been a priest living at Mehling when she was killed. Could a priest really have killed her? Later in the year, I heard rumors that they had a suspect. He was from Turkey and currently out of the country. That made me feel a bit better, that there wasn't a random killer on campus still. However, there was a man named Deniz who was arrested in Portland in January 2004. It was kind of crazy. Deniz was arrested immediately at the airport. He was caught because the day Kate was found by her friend, he was playing poker across from the large dorm where she lived. Like a dog returning to his vomit. The sicko was probably curious about her being found and his handiwork. Because he was there, he was identified by others and submitted to a DNA swab willingly when asked, along with the other poker players. He ran chicken back to Turkey shortly after being swabbed, already knowing what the result would be. Even though he sloppily tried to clean up after the abomination, the monster left saliva DNA on a pillow, which led to his confirmation as the heinous criminal. Detectives quietly waited for him to return because they couldn't extradite him from Turkey. The story turns out he and Kate had a confrontation on the night she went out to the bar on her birthday. Deniz was publicly being abusive to his wife when Kate confronted him and demanded he stop. He yelled at her that that's what they do in Turkey, but Kate replied that they don't do that in Oregon. This exchange was so offensive to him that over the course of the next few days, he actively stalked Kate, got a key from a security guard who was a friend at the university, and crept into her room. Can you imagine? What kind of horrible, awful monster would do that to a stranger that says something to you? Just words, nothing more, just a verbal exchange. Then she was gone, along with any sense, reason, and logic he might have had. He punished her for what she did for her simple words. On a foolish subsequent return, Deniz was arrested in the US. He received 37 years in prison. I would never tell anyone not to follow the dictates of their own conscience, especially someone as self-assured and pure as Kate. As our countries in the world become more and more intermeshed, we will inevitably have more of these collisions of culture and practices. My only advice going forward from this situation is, should you walk tall, speak the truth with purity and no fear, may you also carry a mighty stick and grow 10 eyes around your head. That's not to say live life looking over your shoulder, just be aware of the risks. My time in Mehling Hall will always fill me with fear, but I feel privileged I got to know about the life of Kate. This is in your honor, Kate. Ever wonder why you don't see seagulls at night? From CD BAEZ. For as long as I can remember, I wanted to live near the ocean. The smell of salt water, bonfires, and romping around in the night surf, just like in the movies. I never could imagine how dark the water could get under the moonlight. I lived in a concrete jungle with very few green spaces. The Jersey Shore was a little over an hour away by car, but for a poor kid like me, it may as well have been a million miles away. My best friend and I longed for cool ocean breezes as we sweated out our summers in the city park. But 1987 was going to be our year. We were 14, old enough for summer jobs, and Yoli's mom had just gotten a car. Yoli and I both landed jobs in Asbury Park. This seaside town boasted a huge amusement park by the same name. There was a long boardwalk filled with carnival games, food trucks, and the rooftop bar and grill. Because we were just 14, we couldn't run rides, so we got jobs at the ice cream shop. We were having the time of our lives. We took our breaks lying out and flirting with the lifeguards. Well, Yoli flirted. I just smiled. I was never good at talking to boys. Yoli loved the boys, and the boys loved her right back. She was that girl, golden olive skin. As for me, I looked like a little boy next to her. On the day in question, she was so happy. She came running up to me, bristling with excitement. "Guess what?" she asked in a whisper. What?" "The guys want to take us mini-golfing after work." "We can't go, Yoli. Your mom is coming to get us at 7. "No, she's not." "What do you mean?" "I told my mom I'm sleeping over at Eileen's house, and you are too." "Your cousin?" "Yeah, I called her and asked her if we could sleep over." "My mom never met Eileen's parents, you know how she is." "No problem," she said. "Tell her you're sleeping over at my house." "Okay, what time are we going mini-golfing?" "The guys get off at 8:30. My mom would kill me, especially if she finds out you told those boys we were 16. "She's not gonna find out," she stomped her feet. "Those guys are super cute and they want to hang out with us. Please call your mom. Tell her you're sleeping over at my place." "How are we gonna get to Eileen's?" "The boys will take us." "What if my mom calls your house?" "Tell her we're going to the movies. Then she won't call." "I don't know, Yoli. I'm scared." "Don't worry, girl. I got you." "Fine," I said. "Give me a quarter." She fished a quarter from her pocket, grinning from ear to ear as we walked over to the payphone. My mom had just gotten home from work when she answered. "Mom," I said, "can I sleep over at Yoli's place tonight?" "I don't know, mija. I don't like the way they are over there." "What do you mean?" "Her mom is always drinking, and I don't like the way that girl dresses. You're not gonna be like her." "Mom, please." "All right," she said. "Be home early." "Thank you, Mami. Bendición." "Dios te bendiga, mija." I hung up. "It's done." "Ah, lifeguards," she screamed. "We're gonna have so much fun." I always followed Yoli and her craziness, and it always worked out before. I didn't have any reason to believe that this time would be any different. She brought the bad girl out in me. I wanted to be like her, and now I would give anything to see her again. We had some time to kill before meeting up with the guys. It was getting dark and the boardwalk was transformed. The clientele changed from families with children to sunburnt college kids stumbling out of the rooftop and vomiting in the bushes. "The rooftop is popping," Yoli said. "Do you want to see if we can get a beer?" "No," I said. "You're not getting drunk when we're hanging out with strangers." Yoli rolled her eyes. "Fine, be a Debbie Downer, see if I care." She looked at her watch and beamed. "Let's go to the arcade then, and wait for our boyfriends." "He's not my boyfriend," I said, kicking up some sand with my feet. "I don't even know if I like him. What if he tries to kiss me? You know I don't know anything about that stuff." "Are you scared of boys, Chinita?" she asked, laughing at me. I'm glad you think it's funny, I said, walking away. No, Chinita, I'm sorry, she said, choking back laughter. I'll teach you. She stood up straight, pursing her lips and squinting her eyes in the best impersonation of our home economics teacher I'd ever seen. I was laughing now. Young ladies must learn to be pleasant and accommodating to find good husbands. This lesson will teach you how to kiss a boy. She held up her palm and started to slobber all over it, bursting into laughter. Ew, what the heck was that? I pushed her away, almost falling to the ground. Look, she said, just follow his lead and you'll be fine. Let's go to the arcade. I was watching Yoli try to beat my score at Miss Pac-Man when I felt someone grab me by the waist. I swung my purse around and slammed it into someone's chest. I heard Yoli screech and run up to the tall, dark, and handsome lifeguard she'd been lusting over. She jumped right into his arms. He laughed at his friend, the one I just knocked the air out of with my purse. Dang, boy, he said, cracking up. You're getting beat up on the first date? Tor, who was my guy, was embarrassed. I'm so sorry, he said, hugging me awkwardly. I didn't mean to scare you. Whatever, I said. Yoli and her guy were all over each other. Already they were starting to make out in the middle of the arcade. This dude was presumptuous, if you ask me. For the life of me, I can't remember his name. I grabbed Yoli by the hand and said, Let's go. She yanked her hand away from me and said, No, I'm hungry. Oh, said her guy, invading her space again. Are you hungry? Yes, she said, giggling. I know what you need. He picked her up and ran through the canteen-style doors, separating the arcade from the pizza place next door. Are you hungry? Tor asked behind me. No. Good, then, he said, you can watch me eat. He held the door open for me and we got a booth. He sat right next to me. This was awkward because Yoli and her guy were sitting at a different table. I didn't know why he wanted to box me in. He ordered a large pizza, 2 large Cokes, and a large order of fries. I narrowed my eyes at him and asked, Are you gonna eat all that? Yeah, he said, unless you want to help me eat it. This made me smile and I loosened up. He seemed easygoing, easy to talk to. Eventually, I was having a good time and lost track of my friend. We finished eating, and while Tor was paying the check, I spotted Yoli outside, pressed up against her guy as he was leaning on a fence post. When Tor and I made it outside, I asked her what she was doing. Just having some fun, she and her guy were laughing as he high-fived Tor. Those two seemed to be moving so fast. It made me feel out of place. Seeing some discomfort on my face, Tor said, It's okay. He grabbed me by the hand and pulled me away from them. He spun me around. Do you want to fly? He asked, starting to call like a seagull and flap his arms. I squinted my eyes and thought, this guy's weird. But then Yoli and her guy joined in, and before we knew it, we were all running around, flapping our arms and cawing like seagulls, running into one another, laughing. We were going mini-golfing next. I had never been mini-golfing before, so I was kind of excited. The course was located behind the ticket booth near the park entrance. I would see it when we were dropped off for work. It was a myriad of whirling colors, flashing lights, and loud music. It was separated from the boardwalk by a patch of lush trees, bushes, and thickets of greenery. It was a beautiful contrast to the sea and sand. I was expecting to see the flashing lights in the distance as we got closer, but when we reached the entrance, everything was dark and quiet. It's closed, I shouted. I spun around to Yoli. It's closed. I know, she said, laughing. You can't play golf in the dark, dummy. I wanted to kill her. My face burned and I felt sick to my stomach. She'd lied to me. What was I supposed to do? Then what are we doing here? I asked. Well, it's a cool place to hang out. She took my hand and pulled me down the winding path. See, she said, look how pretty this is. She hopped up onto the head of a whale that usually sprouted water during the day. Look, she said, pointing to a huge wrought iron archway. and the long staircase behind it that led to the beach. We can play at the ocean at night, just like we've wanted to. She hugged me tight. It's so dark, though. I didn't know it could get this dark out here. You can do plenty of things in the dark, her guy said, wrapping his arms around her and pulling her towards the yawning mouth of an octopus cave. Hold on, I said. Where are you two going? Yoli, you can't leave me alone. You know how I get. She pulled away from her guy and grabbed my hands again. Chinita, you don't have to worry. I gave you a nice one. But what about you? Girl, please. I got that boy in check. Go have fun, Chinita. This is what we always talked about. Life's too short to be scared, and you know I'd never let anything bad happen to you. I know. Hey, Tor, she said. Be nice to my girl, please, or I'll cut you. Tor straightened up and saluted her. Yes, ma'am. Yoli caressed my cheek and then let herself be carried into the octopus cave. The last thing I heard from her was her laugh. Don't worry, Tor said. I'm not that kind of guy. You want to take a walk on the beach with me? Still facing the octopus cave, my mind was whirling with a mixture of fear, abandonment, and jealousy. But Yoli was right. Life is too short, and I had to stop acting like a baby. I rubbed the tears from my eyes, turned around, and said, yes. Thankfully, he didn't grab my hand this time. We walked under the archway and down the long staircase. When we reached the bottom, I kicked off my sandals, asking, do you want to walk down to the water? He said quickly, no. Okay, I said, shaking my head. No, I don't mean it like that. I just don't like dark water. You can't see what's in it. But you're a lifeguard, I said. You're not from around here, are you? He asked. I wish. He didn't reply, but I didn't care. I was mesmerized by the dark waves crashing on the shore. It was just like in the movies. We walked in silence, staring out into the water. I'm not sure how long we'd been walking when he broke the silence. You ever wonder why you don't see the gulls at night? I've never thought about that before. Then again, I've never been to the beach at night. That's good, he said. Especially this beach. What do you mean? The water here gets darker in the moonlight. Why? That's when the things that live beyond the sunlight can rise. It's their turn, you see. That's why the gulls stay away. What are you talking about? You're scaring me. Let's sit, he said, motioning to a bench. He grabbed my hands and stared into my eyes. The ocean demands fear and respect. The beholders come to play, and the beholden come to sacrifice. Okay, I said. Homeboy just got weird. I stood up to go get Yoli, but he grabbed my hand, and I pulled away. Can we go now? He looked behind me and out to the horizon. I shouldn't have brought you here. You're not like the others, but they can't differentiate between purity or pollution. They're just sent to devour, just like sharks. Dude, seriously, what the heck are you talking about? He kept looking behind me, so I followed his gaze out to the horizon. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It had to be a trick of the moonlight. What I was looking at couldn't be real. That can't be real, I stuttered. Is it? Let's go, he said, yanking me by the arm. Get off of me, I shouted. My brain refused to accept the reality of what I was seeing. We were pretty high up with a clear view of the horizon, but I could make out 3 silhouettes walking on the water, towards the shoreline. As they walked over the breakwater, more appeared, and they started to multiply. Double, triple, quadruple. They marched slowly up the dunes. What is that? I screamed. We have to go now, he yelled. He pulled me away so fast, I struggled to stay on my feet. Then wham, something smashed into Tor, sending the two of us sprawling across the sand. "The heck are you doing?" I heard Yoli's guy say. I stood up quickly, running to help Tor to his feet. "Let go of him," Yoli's guy said, pushing me away. He looked crazed. "Leave her alone," Tor said, shielding me. He pointed behind us. "The shadows are coming. We have to leave her, man. Let's go." "I love you, dude. You're my brother. Trust me when I tell you they don't deserve to have her. Just get to the archway. I'll be right behind you." Yoli's guy turned on his heel and took off so fast he was almost just a blur. Tor looked at me and said, "Don't worry. I won't let them take you." Before I could utter a word, he threw me over his shoulder and took off running. I couldn't believe how fast he was running, holding the weight of both of us in the sand. The army of shadows was getting closer and still growing. Within minutes, we were zipping up the staircase. And whoosh, we sailed through the wrought iron archway, collapsing to the ground. Yoli's guy was on the ground too, trying to breathe. That's when I realized Yoli wasn't here. I scanned the scene, but she was gone. "Where's Yoli?" I shouted as I stood on wobbly legs. I looked towards her guy. "Where is my friend?" He stood smiling as he dusted the sand from his clothes. "I don't know. Am I her keeper?" I couldn't ponder the magnitude of what he said to me. I tried to run back in there to look for Yoli, but Tor grabbed me by the arm and would not let go. "You'll die if you go back there," he said, "and I'm not gonna let you." I began to cry. As he practically dragged me away, I screamed for Yoli a number of times. I screamed so hard, my voice nearly gave out. All I remember next is being driven home, making excuses to my mom as to why I'd come home. But Yoli never came back. When people asked where I last saw her, all I could say was the beach. And it's true. But beyond that, I have no idea what happened. Nor could I tell anyone the specifics surrounding her disappearance, about the shadows that multiplied. To this day, I have no idea what they were, but according to Tor, they're why the seagulls disappear at the beaches at night. And to me, they're why Yoli is gone forever. Paralysis. From Mystical Mary. I started my first job the summer I turned 16. An old friend of my sister needed a babysitter for her 2 young sons while they were on a summer vacation, and I had enough childcare experience to take care of them. More importantly, I was not picky about how much I was paid. I'll change the names to protect their identities, so I will say the older boy, Josh, was 8 years old, and the younger boy, Jackson, was 6 years old. During the mornings and early afternoons, Josh would be at summer school, so Jackson and I would spend those hours having a really mellow time together. Mostly, this consisted of watching TV and hanging out. This was a blessed relief, as Josh and Jackson would fight like crazy the moment Josh walked through the door. I spent a good deal of my time there trying to keep them from killing each other. All in all, even with the little kid drama, it was a pretty great gig. The kids and I got along, and I got paid to just sit around, watch TV, and have friends over on occasion. For this story to make sense, I have to describe the layout of the house. When you walked through the front door, you were immediately in the living room. If you looked straight ahead, you would see through a doorway that led to the kitchen. On the other side of the kitchen, there was another doorway that aligned with the kitchen doorway, and that led to a small computer room in the back of the house. This computer room also had a door on the right side that led to the backyard. Essentially, when you walked through the front door, you could see through the living room, kitchen, and computer room at a glance. The living room couch was to the immediate left of the front door. One morning, after Jackson and I had watched our morning shows, he asked me if he could go play a game on the computer. This was in the late 90s, so if you were fancy enough to even have a computer, there was usually just one that was shared amongst the entire household. I told him that was fine, and I decided that I would catch a nap really quick before Josh came home and all heck broke loose. I was lying down on the couch with my head on the armrest that was closest to the door. When my head was propped up at the end, I was able to see through the doorways to where Jackson was. This way I knew that he wouldn't be too far out of my line of sight, should anything happen. As I mentioned, this was back when the internet was just becoming a big thing, and a lot of homes didn't even have computers. I emphasize this point because in those days, people weren't talking about sleep paralysis all that much online. However, I did know that 2 of my friends had experienced it, and they had told me what it was like. I had never had an experience with it until that day, and it scared the bejesus out of me. It also couldn't have happened at a worse time, as I had young kids to take care of. At some point during my short nap, I woke up and realized, while my consciousness was awake, my body wasn't. I tried to move. I tried to speak. I tried to do anything, but nothing was working. It was at that moment of realization when I heard something I was wholly unprepared for. The front door swung open right next to me. I knew it was too early for Josh to be home, and I also knew that no one should be stopping by. The problem was, I couldn't move, so there was no way of telling who had just walked into the house. I'd wondered if it was the boy's mom for a second. I thought that she was probably thinking I was a real bum for passing out on the job. That thought was quickly dashed, because as I struggled to open my eyes, I felt whoever was there lean down right next to my head. The thing that struck me the most was that they hovered mere inches away from my face and just stayed there. I heard them breathing, and I knew without a doubt I was in danger. Because no normal person would do something like that to some sleeping teenage girl. It was then that I started to really panic. I tried to scream for Jackson, hoping to warn him that someone was in the house and that he needed to get away. The most I could do was just barely open my eyes wide enough to see him sitting at the computer, completely oblivious to the fact that we had an intruder and that he could be in harm's way. It took so much effort to open my eyes, though, that I soon felt exhausted and couldn't keep them open any longer. After some time had passed, I felt this being, or whoever it was, rise up and away from me. I had this feeling that they moved because they were sure I was unable to get up and stop them. And it was then that I heard footsteps headed toward the computer room. If I weren't already scared out of my mind, this sent me overboard. I tried kicking and screaming and crying as I heard those footsteps move slowly through the kitchen and deliberately make their way into the room where Jackson was sitting. That's when the footsteps stopped, and my heart was left racing. Most likely, he was still totally unaware of the danger that was looming just behind. I listened intently as the footsteps passed into the computer room. I kept expecting to hear Jackson scream or yell out for me, and the paralysis was still so strong, I was helpless and utterly unable to do a thing to protect him. Much to my surprise, though, after the footsteps had stopped in the computer room for a short while, they continued to make their way to the back door. I heard the door open. Someone walked out. Then the door slammed shut, and it was then that I could finally wiggle my fingers and toes. Eventually, I was able to move my body, so I sat up, scared out of my mind and out of breath. Much to my amazement, Jackson was still sitting at the computer, totally calm and still busy playing his game. I then realized he had not heard a thing, or even noticed anything out of the norm. It was this whole ordeal that only I was aware of. I shared this tale with my friends, and eventually one of their boyfriends told me that you enter sleep paralysis before you leave your body. In this state, you experience extreme bouts of paranoia, which explain the sounds that only I heard. He said if you remain calm and not let yourself panic, you'll eventually have a full-blown out-of-body experience. I've tried this multiple times since. He was right. However, the fear you face in the throes of sleep paralysis is enough to make even the bravest person frightened and want to get out of it at any cost. Don't drink strangers' lemonade. From Theo. For privacy's sake, I will not be using specific locations or real names in this story. When I was a junior and senior in high school, I ran my own small-scale landscaping business to make money on the side. Mind you, I live in rural western Maryland, so most of my clients lived out in the country. One day, I was on my way to lay some mulch and mow for a new client. I'll call him Ben. Ben paid me much better than what I was used to, and even paid me above my asking price, which I thought was odd, but chalked it up to a man wanting to do a nice gesture or get good karma. Ben was about 20 miles out in farm country, and when I pulled in front of his house, I immediately noticed the condition of the property. The house looked abandoned. Some of the windows had boards over them. The roofing was scattered and shingles were falling off, and the wood looked like it hadn't been changed in 40 years. As I was looking at the house from my car, I saw somebody come out of the front door. He was about 6 feet tall or so, clean-shaven, nicely dressed, and overall didn't match the appearance of the place. I got out of my car to introduce myself, and Ben began to approach me very quickly. In a hurried tone, he said, "I'm Ben, and I want you to mulch around all my porches and mow my front lawn. Don't go in my shed if you don't have the tools you need. Go back home and get them yourself. I don't have none." I was caught a little off guard by Ben's brutish nature, but I just responded, "All right, sir, no problem. I'll let you know when I'm done." Ben hurried back into the house and I got to work. It wasn't a particularly difficult job, but when I started to mulch around his back porch, I could smell something. It was a rancid smell, eerily really similar to that of dead roadkill. At first, I didn't know where the smell was coming from. Then I saw the shed. The shed was in much better condition than the rest of the house, which threw me off. It almost looked brand new. I started to walk towards it, and the smell got stronger. It was so bad, I tried to tie my handkerchief around my mouth to block it out. Right when I approached the lock on the front door, I heard, "Hey!" It was Ben. He was hanging out the bottom floor window. Oh crap, I thought. I'm about to get chewed out for going towards his shed. "It's hot out there. Want to come in for a cold drink?" Ben yelled again. I was a little hesitant, but I'd been working for almost 2 hours by then, and I'd already drunk the last bit of my water. Sure, thanks," I said, walking towards the main house. I took a brief glance at the shed behind me. When I got into the main house, it was disgusting. There was trash all over the ground, no decor, and the one couch I saw had holes and stains all over it. The whole house looked uninhabited. "I'll make you some freshly squeezed lemonade, my mother's recipe," Ben said as he smiled, walking over to the kitchen. I found an old wooden chair in the kitchen and carefully sat down. As Ben began making the lemonade, he leaned over the counter, and I saw about a 7-inch buck knife blade peeking through his pants waistline. This immediately put me on edge. "So how long you been doing this little business?" he asked. "About a year or so," I responded, my eyes still on the knife. "Your parents okay with you going to a stranger's house?" Ben asked as he turned around to look at me. My heart rate picked up, and I froze for a second. Yeah, I always tell them where I'm going," I said. That was a lie, but hopefully that would be enough to deter him if he did try to do something to me. I immediately decided it was time to go and began looking for a way out. "Probably a good idea. Better safe than sorry, right?" Ben said as he came back with one lemonade in a plastic cup. "Is there a bathroom I could use?" I asked nervously. "Sure thing, right down the hall." I went down the hallway and tried to collect myself for a moment. Maybe I'm just overthinking this, I thought. A knife is common, especially for people out here. Something could have just died under his shed. He also paid extremely well, so I splashed some water on my face and decided to go back out. As I was walking back to the kitchen, careful not to step on any exposed nails or broken 2x4s, I peeked around the corner, just in time to see Ben tap a little baggie into my lemonade. He then quickly concealed it in his shirt sleeve. I have never run so fast. I ran to the front door, the one Ben greeted me at before, and I could hear him behind me yelling, "Hey, don't forget your lemonade! Don't be rude, take it!" I sprinted to my car, turned on the ignition, and flew out the gravel driveway. In my rearview mirror, I could see Ben at the front door, holding my lemonade in his left hand and his buck knife in the right. When I got home, I immediately called the police, giving them the address. When they went there, reportedly they found no bin, no evidence anyone was living there. Supposedly, it had been abandoned for over a decade now. When I asked about the shed, all they said was that there were dozens of dead animal carcasses cut up, lying all over the floor. There were also chains and handcuffs hung up all over the walls. After this experience, I never went to another job site without a partner. I hate to think what would have happened to me if I did drink Ben's lemonade. Ben, if you're reading this, I hope our paths never cross again. Night Terror, from Mike T. I'm just your average guy. Nothing special about me. I've been driving a city bus for about 15 years now. It's a job, pays the bills, keeps me going. I've seen a lot of things over the years. Fights, breakups, the occasional drunk passenger making a scene. But I've never experienced anything like what happened last Thursday. That night will be burned into my memory for as long as I live. A night when the routine of my job turned into something out of a nightmare. It was a typical shift at first. Started at 6 p.m. right as the sun was setting. The city looked different at night. Quieter, but also more alive in a way. The glow of the streetlights, the buzz of the nightlife starting to pick up. It's a different world. My route took me through the heart of downtown, and then out into some of the more suburban areas before looping back in. It's a long route. Takes about 2 hours to complete the whole thing. Things started to get strange around 11 p.m. The bus was nearly empty by then, just a few passengers scattered here and there, lost in their own little worlds. I was looking forward to the end of my shift in a couple hours, thinking about home. Then he got on the bus. This guy, probably in his mid-40s, ragged looking like life had been hard on him. Not unusual for my late-night shifts, but there was something off about him. He paid his fare and small change, all while avoiding eye contact. He sat near the back, and I could see him in the rearview mirror, just staring ahead, not moving. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling and focus on the road. The next stop was in a more secluded part of the route, an area that's absolutely desolate at night. As we approached, the guy suddenly stood up. He pulled the stop request cord. I slowed down, pulling over to the deserted stop. But he didn't get off. The guy just stood there, looking down the empty, dimly lit street. "End of the line for you?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't respond. Instead, he just sat back down, still not looking at me. I shrugged it off, hitting the gas and moving on. Maybe he pulled the cord by mistake, or maybe he was just confused. It does happen. But then, at every stop, he did the same thing. Stood up, pulled the cord, then sat back down without getting off. I felt more unease with each stop. It wasn't just strange, it was unsettling. The bus was empty now, except for him and me. I considered calling it in, but what would I say? That a passenger kept pulling the stop cord and not getting off? We were nearing the end of the route, the part that wraps around the old industrial district. It's isolated, with factories and warehouses that have been shut down for years. No one gets on or off here, especially not at this hour. But sure enough, he pulled the stop cord again. This time, when I stopped the bus, he got up and began to walk towards the front. But he didn't head for the door. Instead, he stopped just behind my seat, looming over me. I could feel him there. I could hear him breathing. I was tense, gripping the steering wheel, unsure of what to do next. "Is this your stop?" I managed to ask, my voice much steadier than I actually felt. He didn't answer. The silence stretched out thick and heavy. Then, in a movement so fast I barely had time to react, he lunged at me. In that moment, adrenaline kicked in, and my instincts took over. I've dealt with unruly passengers before, but nothing like this. Almost by instinct, I hit the gas. His hands reached for me, his fingers clawing at the air. I managed to swerve, trying to throw him off balance while keeping the bus from veering off the road. It was a fine line between defending myself and ensuring we didn't crash. "Back off!" I yelled, as forcefully as I could. My voice sounded alien in that quiet bus, a mix of fear and emotions. I glanced at the mirrors, hoping by some miracle another car was nearby, someone who could see and help. But there was nothing, just the dark, empty road behind us and the looming, silent warehouses. He stumbled slightly as the bus swerved, but he regained his balance quickly, his eyes locking onto me with an intensity that gave me chills. There was something in his gaze, though, a desperation, maybe madness, that was far beyond anything I've encountered in my life. Then I thought about the emergency button, a silent alarm to alert dispatch and the police. But it was out of reach without taking my eyes off of him. And I couldn't afford to do that, not even for a second. Then, as if the situation couldn't get any worse, he pulled something from his pocket. The dim light from the bus overheads glinted off a small, sharp object, a knife. This was no longer just a struggle. It would be a fight for my life. I did the only thing I could think to do. I slammed on the brakes. The sudden stop sent him lurching forward, right into the dashboard and away from me. It was a risky move, but it gave me the precious seconds to jump out of my seat and make a run for the emergency exit at the back of the bus. He recovered more quickly than I'd hoped. His footsteps thundered on the bus floor as he chased after me. I fumbled with the emergency exit, my hands shaking. The sound of his breathing was close, too close. With a final pull, the door swung open, and I tumbled out onto pavement. The cool night air hit me like a splash of cold water. I scrambled to my feet, expecting him to come barreling out after me. But he didn't. He peered through the bus's back window, and I saw him pacing back and forth, his form shadowy and distorted through the glass. I could hear him muttering to himself, still holding that knife, but he made no move to follow me outside. Using my phone, I dialed 911. My voice trembled as I explained the situation. The dispatcher assured me the police were on their way, urging me to stay on the line and to keep a safe distance from the bus. As I waited, hidden in the shadows of the nearest warehouse, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. How had a normal shift turned into this nightmare? Who was this man, and what did he want from me? Then, in the distance, I heard the sirens. Relief washed over me, mixed with a sense of dread. For now, I was safe, or as safe as one could be after an encounter like that. The police were there in only moments, their lights painting the dark street with flashes of blue and red. It was over. I watched them approach the bus. The police took over the scene quickly. They found him still inside the bus, no longer holding the knife, but sitting quietly in one of the seats, staring blankly ahead as if the confrontation had never happened. They arrested him without incident, a stark contrast to the chaos he had caused just minutes before. I gave them my statement, my hands still trembling, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. In the days that followed, the encounter stuck with me. I couldn't shake the image of the guy's face, his desperation. I learned from the police he was a man on the edge, someone who had lost everything and just snapped. Sadly, he took his distress out on me. It was a sad story, one that ended with him behind bars, but that did little to ease my mind. I took some time off work. When I finally did come back, everything felt different. The bus, the streets, the passengers. It was all the same, and yet it wasn't. I was jumpy, on edge, seeing potential threats in every shadow. The city had lost its familiarity to me. Life has a way of moving forward, though, even when we wish it would pause. As the days turned into weeks, the fear began to dull. I even tried talking to a therapist for a while, working through it. Before long, the man was sentenced. At least that was some form of closure. To this day, I still drive that bus. The bus drives on, and so do I, a little slower, sure, a little more thoughtful. The idea that makes me paranoid still is just how unpredictable it all happened, and how anything could happen next. A Tale from a Night Ride. From Nightshine. I've always had a thing for the nighttime ride after work. Something about those empty roads and how the world sleeps while I'm out with the grumbling song of the engine. My old Kawasaki Vulcan, a cruiser, may not have been the newest model on the market, but she had endurance and character that newer bikes seemed to lack. Heck, I'd go so far as to say she even had a soul. She started without issue every other night, except this one. It was one of those nights. The sky was a deep black, dotted with distant pinpricks of light. One could hardly call them stars. On nights like this, I tend to take the long way back home. Through the road that snaked through the outskirts, where the fields stretched out deep into the dark, those places were the best kinds of rides. That night, on one such empty night, there was tension. Something about it just felt off, but I tried to ignore the feeling, figuring it was my mind playing on my already thoroughly overclocked nerves. I should have known better. I suddenly heard rumbling in the distance, a thunderous sound that emanated out of everywhere and nowhere at once. I glanced to a mirror, but didn't find anything strange. That's odd, I muttered into my helmet. Taking it a step further, I glanced over my shoulder. Again, nothing. But the sense of foreboding never left me. In fact, it got worse. The noise grew louder, more distinct. I twisted the throttle, urging the bike to go faster. But that sound kept pace, like a phantom gallop of hooves that I couldn't see, but I could almost feel fingers tickling at the back of my neck. Panic crept in, causing my gloved hands to sweat. It was clear that the fields on either side of me were empty, except for the grains. Nothing but darkness stretched out to the horizon, but I could sense something something that sounded like horses. But there was no horse on this planet that could push over 100 miles per hour, which was my current speed. Who was it? What was it really? I had no idea. As if these phantom horses weren't bad enough, my bike started to splutter. The engine's grumbling purr turned into a wheezing and coughing gasp, really. And just like that, it died. The lights, the engine, the dash, it was as if she too had sensed the presence of something wrong and refused to go any further. I was left there, stranded on an empty road with only the ghostly echo of hooves. No longer chasing me, however. Instead, the sounds circled me, like predators stalking down on their wounded prey. I tried everything to get the engine back, but she wasn't having it. I was alone, stranded. That's when I saw it, rather him. A figure standing not too far from me. His back was turned, statuesque and silent. Don't suppose you could give me a jump?" I called out. But no response came. Cautiously, I got off my bike and walked towards what a little voice in the back of my head thought was simply a tweaker out on the country roads. Which wouldn't be unusual out here. Uncommon, sure, but not unusual. Each step I took was slow, deliberate. I didn't want to send this guy into a panic, making an already freaky night much worse. As I drew closer, the supposed tweaker turned to face me, and at first I thought I was looking into my own reflection, because he had my face. But rapidly, moment after moment, his face changed somehow, changing from one face to another, and in between there was something monstrous. But his eyes at all times held a fire in them. In that very moment, I knew what powerlessness really felt like. We stood there, staring at each other. I was too scared to move. With a tilt of his head, he flashed a wide, toothy smile. If I know anything about that look, I was being sent a message. "I'm not done with you just yet," expressed by way of a facial twitch. I was so freaked out, I hadn't even noticed the hoofbeats had fallen quiet, that the world around me had gone silent. He then turned away from me, then held up only 2 fingers. I'm not the smartest man in the world, so I was pretty darn sure it wasn't a peace sign. A countdown, perhaps. Only time would make it clear which it was. A sudden strong wind swept through the area, making the slightly hidden grain and grass begin to dance. It was just enough to have me take my eyes off of him for a moment. I looked back quickly, and he was gone. I was alone on the road once again. I ran over to my bike, gave the engine a crank. Nothing. Another crank. A wheezing spin and a cough, but then nothing. I gave it one last try, and finally, she warily rumbled to life. To be sure, before pulling away, I gave her a moment to warm up. Then I resumed my ride home. But to say my head wasn't on a swivel, my eyes scanning the dark, would be an understatement. Since that night, I've had people tell me I've become more withdrawn and moody. Heck, even my dog noticed something was up. She keeps her distance from me. Now when I ride at night, I keep a very close ear out for the sound of hooves. On the occasion where I thought I heard them, I nearly had a heart attack. But so far, so good. Tales from the Break Room is a viewer-submitted podcast featuring allegedly true scary stories that happened on the way to, on the way from, or at work. If you want your story to be narrated on the show, send it to us at eeriecast.com/submit. As of April 14th, we're paying 3 cents per word for stories that are approved and make it onto the show. Submission does not guarantee approval or payment. For a limited time only, PayPal only. Tales from the Break Room is an EerieCast Network original podcast hosted by Darkness Prevails. You can follow him on Twitter at Dark Prevails, and you can hear thousands more stories read by him on our other show, Unexplained Encounters. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow and rate Tales from the Break Room on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can also enjoy plenty more horror-themed podcasts at EerieCast.com.